Hi, welcome to the last session of InterFX Live. We're here with Martin.
Tim Kramm.
Tim. Martin's out there. I told you should have sat up here, Martin. Okay. Anyway, we've been talking about product quality assurance and visions in use of various systems, vision systems. So where I'm at is, I come from a background of, if you had to inspect it, you inspected it. Back in, people used a blackboard and a whiteboard, and they sat there and stared until their eyes went crossed. So where have we been? Where are we going? How's it, so why don't you give us a little up-to-date there on that?
So basically the whiteboard and the dartboard are still the standard, and then there are various optical systems, mechanical automation systems to improve upon what humans can't do. So in general, I agree with you that pretty much the manual inspection is probably not the best thing out there, but it's still what you have to go back to if you can't use anything else. So a lot of the challenges out there are doing containers that don't fit normal. I'd say they're not just round glass vials, so they're plastic syringes now. There's bags that are printed, and the automated systems don't always do those as well, and then you still have to fall back and do human inspection.
Do you find that people go with a redundant system, or is it if they go with a vision system, that's it, or what is
Normally,
it?
if you go with a vision system, that's it.
Right.
Yeah, if you find any rejects, there's always a debate on do you actually recheck them or you just throw them away, and most people just throw them away. So depending on the product value.
This is usually based on 100%.
100%, yeah. For injectable products, it's 100%
Right.
testing required. So you have to check every one of them.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, one of the things I had not thought about was flexibility. So why don't you give us a little insight into flexibility? From what I'm hearing, it could be pretty much, as long as you can see through the package, apparently?
Correct. Glass is relatively easy, and then as you go to plastic, then the material is more opaque, so the cameras can't see as much. People can't see as much either. So, at that point, you're looking at you do a risk assessment and kind of address what kind of particles could be in there, and then you do your best to find anything that's similar to what could be there. So, but it's not perfect, but systems are getting a little better, and the automation level's coming up. The cameras are more accurate, so it's getting better.
And these are in line?
Typically in line, yes.
And where do you usually fill? Do you be at the end of a fill finish, or I'm not that familiar with it.
I would just no.
That's good.
Yeah. You check typically after the fill, just after the fill, or with glass, or basically any time you could damage the container or do something to it, you want to check after that point. So probably just before the labeling or final packaging, secondary packaging.
Yeah, we had Joel Russo gave a talk earlier this morning, and he was actually talking about an experience he had where they were filling a powder in a vial. It sounds to me like they had the vision system. All the work that he had to do probably would have been completely obviated because they would have known they had the problem before. In other words, they caught it. You would have caught it, not let it go. Right?
Ideally, yes. Yeah, that's the goal of the vision inspection. Yeah. So.
Okay, so let's say I want to put in something like that in place. So what is customarily the first thing I do? You come to a client. I mean, what sort of things do you look at?
Initially, we need to test the containers. So you do the risk assessment, find out what kind of particles you're looking for, or do an evaluation on the container and see just what the kind of results you can get, and then you would go ahead and size the machine for their capacity requirements, and then move forward with trials. You want to do, we got to go back to the standard, so what you do is you contaminate some vials, and then you run a human study, so an app test where you train people to inspect, you have them inspect, and then you calculate their results, how good they are. And then what you have to do is show that the mechanical system can beat the humans. It's typically not a problem, but all of that will allow you to then validate the system and put it into production.
So the standard is taken as the standard that we discussed earlier. I mean,
Yeah,
we joked
that's
about
still
it, but that's it.
USP. That's still
Yeah.
the standard written into the books. So because mechanical systems are all. I mean, many of them out there, so they're all different. So people are really still the only thing you have as something to work against. And I think everybody. There's lots of published papers, published knowledge. People are just not that good at it, but it's still required.
Let me ask you this. I mean, what limitations are there on the application of this system? I mean, obviously it can't be an opaque container, right?
Well, traditional systems they spin the glass. So you take the container, you spin it, and that would bring any particles up and moving in the solution. Then you take multiple pictures of it, and then you compare those pictures. And if you see some particle move, in and out, it's pretty straightforward. Then you can reject that container. The system, particularly we use a different mechanism. We vibrate the container, and this allows us to look at containers that aren't perfectly round or they can be opaque because we're using a different means to mechanically agitate the particles. And to a certain extent, since we're not spinning, we can ignore parts of the container that would throw a traditional system off. It doesn't have to be perfectly round. We could do square, round, rectangular. It doesn't matter.
So the system does not have to see through the container.
It doesn't have to see. Our system, particularly, we look from the top and we look from the bottom. So if you have floating particles, we can catch that from a camera on the top. And we're basically looking at the surface of the liquid and the top of the container, and then the camera from the bottom would look for anything that would sink or be stuck to the bottom half of the container. So in that respect, yeah, we don't have to move it around to do anything else.
I got you. So when you say size, what are we talking about? Number of stations? I'm not. When you size a piece of equipment, what is it sized to?
We size it by. It takes about 3.5 seconds to do an inspection, and so we just keep adding cameras and holders until we match the line speed. So you can keep, and you're basically rotating in on a big turntable. So if you maybe have 2 cameras at each station, so 2 cameras looking up, then 2 cameras looking down. But if you're running double that speed, we just add 4 stations. So you always still have the same 3.5 second inspection time. You just keep adding more cameras so you can keep up with the line.
Okay, so in other words, instead of doing 1 at a time, you may do 10 at a time or
Correct.
6 at a time.
Probably 6 is
6 is
pretty fast. So
yeah, I would think so. So what typical application? I mean, what areas of our industry is it your standard? Obviously in the sterile area, but where? I mean,
so we're tailored to do blow-fill seal technology. So it's a aseptic technology that does plastic containers. And mainly we got into the business because the traditional vision systems weren't capable of inspecting these containers.
Right.
So people using this technology were basically only left with the manual methods for people inspecting. And so it's not very efficient, and it's not that good, it's not that efficient, and it costs a lot. So an automated system was the solution to that.
Yeah, I understand. So in a lot of cases, that would be ophthalmic solutions, stuff like that?
Ophthalmics, inhalation, and we also, injectable products, injectable drugs.
Really? It would blow, fill, seal?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Because, I know that's an area that they're starting to move into with blow, fill, seal. So that seems to be a certain increase in the uptake on that. We see a lot of, there was a lot of guys discussing it.
It's used throughout the world, but particularly just not so much in the U.S.
Yeah.
So if you...
I guess that's what I meant.
Yeah. So adopting on this side of the pond, we would say. So.
Yeah, we have a rather domestic view sometimes. I apologize.
Yeah.
So we're in the more blow, fill, seal. Other than that particular aspect? I mean, you find yourself more prone to biotech, small molecules.
Sure. I mean, the traditional is small molecule. And a lot of diluents and things like that are used with biotech. Lyophilized products. You need the sterile water to go along with it, or the saline. But more and more moving into biologics, vaccines. So the ability to deliver in a single dose a small amount of vaccine where you don't have the issues, multi-dose vial. If you break one, you've lost 20 doses. So if you can package everything in a single dose, you can show that you have your sterility assurance, and
Right.
then you also, the plastic containers are just more robust.
So do you see I thought that, kind of multi-use vials, they're not so common anymore.
Multi-use or multi-dose you see that still in the ophthalmics.
Okay.
So like a 5 milliliter
I got you.
eye drops.
Yeah.
A little bit like contact cleaning solutions. So 300, 400 milliliter containers, that type of product. And many of those are sterile filled, but they're preserved products.
Okay, so just for clarity, in the case of an ophthalmic, we're talking about, aside from the blow-fill seal, the one that most people, most pharmacists, most manufacturers are familiar is the high-density polyethylene white vial with the
Correct.
clear plastic dropper on top. So where does your system inspect something like that?
If you're totally opaque, you're not going to be able to inspect at that point.
Okay, so it's not going to be able to handle that
No,
particular
and
type.
most ophthalmics, the 100% inspection is a requirement for injectable products. Most people would be, if you had a totally white, they would set up periodically they would pull a few and do destructive testing on them.
Okay.
Just to check. So maybe once an hour they pull a sample and then they check it to make sure that there's no issues going on.
Okay.
But the 100% isn't required on those.
Okay, yeah. Now, and the reason I'm asking is a lot of people, we get, at least in my consulting business, people are always looking to, bolt on other things that can assure that the quality of the product's beyond question. But, I think in this particular case, I think what's important about your system is it's fulfilling a requirement. A lot of times people think that this helps test quality back into the product by exclusion.
Correct. No. You're just proving what you've done. So you're proving that you're hopefully doing a good job. But yeah, it doesn't make the product any better in itself.
So what sort of support do you give folks to, a lot of times these things are, let's face it, a lot of times particles are created by misunderstanding the physical chemistry of the product itself.
Sure. Yeah, particles coming from the product itself. Yeah, those are, that's, biotech, that's a huge topic because, many of these solutions are sensitive to movement, so if you jar the product too much, you might have particles form. So it's it's an ongoing thing and it's product specific. Services we offer, the NAP test, we have sister company that does contract manufacturing. So they have the trained people to do the visual inspection. So we're able to, to supply the background on how to validate the system. So we can get in there and do the inspections, the NAP study, and then we can, go ahead with the machine and show that we can do better than that.
So they manufacture the product for the client, or
two ways. They could manufacture it for them, or maybe they're just supplying the trained people, and then the customer would supply the product.
And they do the formulation, or they just do the end use?
No, they do formulation too. So yeah, they can do everything for you if you
got
want. So, or as little as you need. So.
Okay, good. So what sort of, I would think, I'm always looking for various applications where you can use something like, I think the most impressive application I've seen of a vision system was in a quality monitoring system for contact lenses, where they would monitor this.
Yeah.
And it was pretty impressive, but what I find with a lot of people is they don't, in our system, I guess it really comes back to what the regs are and what the requirements are, but it turns out to be when you have an electronic online system that creates a lot of data, the question is how do you manage said data? Because you're obviously going to find stuff, Joe Average is not going to find using a more conventional system, and how do you reconcile that? It gets back to your first point. How do you help them through that? Because that seems to be a catch-22 deal. Right?
Yeah, you're finding more
It
problems.
wasn't there before, but what did you do to me,
Correct. Yeah, so now you're finding things, and maybe they always were present, but you didn't know it. That's correct. How to deal with, some of it can be a direct feedback, particularly if it is, let's just say, some part of the filler that mechanically has problems. Definitely that, you're going to have to do a root cause and find out where those particles are coming from. And and particularly also is, are those particles that, I mean, if it's inherent to the product or the product causes them, what's the acceptable level of having them? If you know they're always going to be there, then what's your acceptance criteria for letting them pass? So that's, yeah. I think from that standpoint, we have a number of validation specialists who do a lot of work like that. We're really looking at quality and what do you do when you find stuff. But most time in injectable products, if you find anything, you're looking at throwing it away. It's done.
Absolutely. I think it's always been. What amazes me is when people use a bigger lens to look at anything, they find stuff that wasn't there before, and then they try to reconcile it against what they've known.
Yeah.
And the answer is, well, that's not the state in which you have the process now. So I think there's a little bit of shock management involved with this too, right? So let me ask you this then. How early on do people get you involved with this sort of an application? I would think, you know what I'm saying, to avoid the inevitable, gee whiz, I didn't ever seen it before.
Ideally we're doing it during container design. So we're doing it at the point where, you're functionally choosing, we're gonna have a lure connection, we're gonna have a 2 milliliter container, and then you take a look at the container designs for specifically inspection. So maybe cosmetically it looks better some other way, but you adjust the dimensions so it's easier to inspect. So we like to start as early as possible, but there's a lot of products out there that are already running with still having the manual inspection. So in those cases, we're probably taking the existing container and just showing that we can do a better job than the people they have inspecting.
That's got to seem to be a lot more difficult, because I would imagine that no thought was given to an automatic inspection at
Correct.
that point.
Some of them are pretty, they don't lend themselves that well. So.
Well, let me ask you this: a pre-filled syringe or a cartridge syringe, some cartridges for a reusable type system. That's got to be. Is that those?
That's something that's our next step. So right now we're kind of exclusively doing the blow-fill seal containers.
Yeah.
But down the road, definitely these, let's say the containers out there that even the traditional vision systems don't do well on, we're definitely going to start taking a look at those. And I agree. I mean, those, you got text on them. You have a lot of issues. Some of them are I mean, they're very difficult. So it's.
I mean, to me, these things just seem. When I look at them, it's like, how do they inspect that in the first place?
Correct. They're difficult.
So. Yeah. So, what would you get? I mean, my guess has got to be they got to be using a manual system.
I would suspect yes. There's not any automated systems out there right now that'll do like a pre-filled syringe with the text on the side. It's very difficult. I mean, you can take pictures. Maybe very slow systems then could do it, but it's not going to be a speedy mechanism.
Gotcha. Jeez. One of the other, and the other thing is there's moving targets with this stuff. I mean, to me, injectables, clear. If it's there, it's no good. But the other things there are is what's an acceptable limit, what's an unacceptable limit. I mean, that's where you get into this catch-22 as well. I think, and the particles that inevitably show up. Let me just say it. So do people use your system to monitor stability?
Not to this point, no. It's not used for that. Mainly just quality.
Okay.
So, and to your point, the sensitivity of our machine, we have an algorithm looking at those pictures. We're adding them, we're subtracting them, we're determining if there's particles in there, and we can turn up the sensitivity, but the downside of that is you start getting false rejects at a certain point. You're picking out particles that aren't actually there. So you have to look at that. You have to look at, do you want to ensure that you have 100% or 99.9, but maybe have 5% false rejects, or do you want to find 97% of what comes by and get no false rejects? And that can definitely be a debate on what you want to get. But, if you're still going back to the base of humans, when the humans are only finding 20% of the particles, that difference between 97 and 99 doesn't look so bad. And it's all this theoretical too. It's you're creating the contaminated containers, and you're just guessing what what particles could be in there. So it's all, if you do run your filling system properly, you don't have those particles to begin with. So,
How do you say, just, some folks are going to pick up this discussion and say, geez, I like that, but for example, if I wanted to challenge a system, I mean, how do I put together, something to challenge it
yeah,
with?
we work with a company that specifically does that. They make samples, so we'll send them 5,000 containers, and they'll go through and put in contamination, or they'll contaminate a number of them. Each container is marked that if it is or it isn't, and one of the difficulties is these are plastic containers, so we send these same contaminated containers through the board of people to look at them, and even if we don't contaminate a container, we still have to poke it with we have to make the same incision into it as the contaminated ones, because if people see one that doesn't have a hole in it, then they think that's they can infer that one's not contaminated. So it's a challenge to produce these things, and it's and it gets back, is it representative, and are we really looking for the right thing? So there's a lot of forethought that needs to go into that.
Is that all part of the
It's all part of the
installation
service. What we
qualification?
that would be on the very early end of the project, is really looking at the whole system and just figuring out what we need to find.
Right. So what is an online? How do you maintain it in calibration and stuff? Is it just as
Similar. You would run periodically. You would run contaminated containers through it and make sure that it was up to still where, again, this proper standard.
All right. I just want to make sure I had the right idea. So I guess where do you see the most pickup? I mean, do you see it in other areas too? I mean, so you were saying you were seeing that's our next challenge is the pre-fill, and what would be in addition? I would think that
bags. IV bags out there. They have a lot of issues right now, so that would be an area to growth into.
A lot of
but
issues.
They're very difficult though. So
they're not easy to do. Right?
Yeah, they're flexible, and they have text on them, and it's hard.
The pen injection systems are not easy either. I mean, there's even questions as to what's the appropriate way to assemble the sub-pieces. So, I mean, to me...
I don't think we have a solution for everybody, so that's...
Well, no, I think it's important for people to understand that this is one of the solutions to get at.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, to me, in this area of that kind of a testing, I mean, what would customarily be a go-to technology that you would think of, other than having 15 people sit in front of a black and white board?
I don't know. I don't know.
There is no one go-to system then. No, I'm just saying.
There are a lot of companies. I mean, that do specialty systems that really develop for that, and particularly for the assemblies. They're integrating into the whole mechanism as it is built. But yeah, I don't. Those are mostly one-offs, custom design.
Gotcha.
So, but there's a number of companies that do that.
Okay. And just for clarity, these things are usually built into the fill system as it's being put together. When you get early.
Typically, yes. Typically, you're moving to an automated system from the get-go. Yes. So I would say new systems coming out now would always address that.
So in the blow-fill seal, I mean, there's not a whole lot of people doing that per se, but there's a lot of people using the technology.
Correct.
So you actually test them after the fact.
Correct.
You follow my logic?
Yeah. We're going to go back and address people that are already out there that they didn't have a solution, automated solution available to them when they started. So definitely.
Okay.
Machines are pretty easy to justify if they work, because having 20 people sit there every day it's not so cost effective. So.
Yeah, I think that's important, and I think in making it an integral part of the process. See, I think this was a concept that was used in anything that it was first used. I think when people put on weight control on compression machines, and then the next step was obviously weight sorting after compression. And people at first it was we're testing, we're excluding. In other words, we could take a bad process and run it, and this will make it a good process. I think to me that's always been flawed thinking, because that's not the way you walk into this thing. Have you seen that? You understand that philosophy? I think.
Yeah. No,
you've probably run into it a few times.
Yeah, you can't Band-Aid something that's not being done properly the first
Right.
time.
So I think that's important thing to understand, absolutely. So I think that brings us to a close here at day 3 at Interfax Live. I want to appreciate your attention and everybody who came to see us, and thanks a lot.
Thank you.